But the people went about business as usual, built up some of the structures and continued life in the fast lane, not heeding the warning signs. And then in AD 79, Mount Vesuvius started to rumble again. But the people went on business as usual down their streets of business and pleasure until on August the 24th, AD 79, Mount Vesuvius just blew its top and it rained red-hot pumice on the city of Pompeii for 3 days and completely buried the city. And archaeologists have been excavating for the last 200 years this city, a city that had warning signs but failed to hear them. They discovered what was left of the bodies of some people who didn't listen to the warning signs. Well, we'll return to Pompeii a little later on, but I want to take you back to Jerusalem 2,000 years ago. We want to begin in Jerusalem at Herod's temple. This is the temple that Herod the Great built to sort of get in favor with the Jewish people. He was only part Jewish. Herod did a lot of building in Palestine. You can come here to Caesarea and you can see his aqueduct. This carried water up on top, bringing water to the city of Caesarea. Herod the Great built Caesarea. This is where Paul came before King Agrippa and Felix and so on. And you can see the palace, what's left of the palace of Herod the Great, right here on the Mediterranean Sea. Herod had a lot of fortresses. You can see this one on the left. This is known as Herodion, just outside the city of Bethlehem. Probably the very place where Herod sent the soldiers to try to kill the baby Jesus in the Christmas story, because it's not far from Bethlehem. Then on the right, you can see the fortress of Masada. This is high up in the mountains beside the Dead Sea, a magnificent view of the Dead Sea. Herod had 2 palaces up here, huge water cisterns to collect water when it did rain, if it rained. It didn't rain much in these places, but you could park buses inside his cisterns, his great big water reservoirs. Another fortress that Herod had was over here in Jordan. This was known as Macarius, over in the Jordanian side. This is the place where another Herod had John the Baptist beheaded, right here in this fortress. Now, Herod had a lot of fortresses because Herod the Great had a lot of enemies. Caesar Augustus, his friend, once said, it's better to be Herod's pig than Herod's kids, because Herod killed his kids and killed his wife. He was a very brutal man. This is the same man that tried to kill the baby Jesus in the Christmas story. Well, it was Herod that built this temple for the Jews. And it was to this temple that Jesus Christ came again and again. He came here on one occasion and his followers took him on a little tour of the temple to show him how magnificent it was. This was one of the most spectacular buildings in the ancient world at this time. The Romans had poured a lot of money into this as well, and a magnificent structure with gold and silver throughout the temple. And so the disciples were showing him the temple, and Jesus said to them, "Do you not see all these things? Assuredly I say to you, not one stone shall be left here upon another that shall not be thrown down." This place is going to be completely ruined. Now the disciples, of course, couldn't believe such a thing could happen to their magnificent temple. So they came a little later up here onto the Mount of Olives. We're looking from the Mount of Olives across to Jerusalem, where that golden dome is. That's where the temple once stood. Solomon's temple before that as well. And as they're sitting up here with Jesus, they asked him this question: "Tell us, when will these things be? You mentioned that the temple is not going to have one stone upon another. When's that going to happen?" Jesus then proceeded to give them some amazing predictions concerning the city of Jerusalem, concerning not only the city of Jerusalem, its temple, and the nation of the Jewish people. And these predictions have been amazingly fulfilled. We'll see that in just a moment. Let's notice 5 very specific predictions. He said, number one, Jerusalem would be surrounded by an embankment. That's like a wall, and he said it would be completely destroyed. Now, he'd said this a few days before when he came into Jerusalem on a donkey. You remember the story. As he gets to the top of the Mount of Olives, where he's sitting now a few days later with his disciples, I want you to notice what he said. Now, as he drew near to Jerusalem, he saw the city and he wept over it. Can you believe it? See the Son of God sobbing his heart out for this city, because he can see what's going to happen. He can see what's about to take place in a few years' time. So he weeps over it, saying, days will come upon you when your enemies will build an embankment around you, surround you and close you in on every side, and level you and your children within you to the ground. Prediction number one. Prediction number two, the temple would be totally destroyed. We just saw it a moment ago. What did he say? Not one stone will be left here upon another. Now, I take people here to this temple area, and you can see some of the massive stones that were in part of the construction of this building. Here, standing in front of one of these stones. This is typical Herod stone, where you see that sort of an edging like that. That's everywhere around this part of the temple, this part of Jerusalem here, because this is built by Herod's workmen. One stone I've seen, it's longer than this building. It goes 20 metres long, 2 metres wide, 3 metres high. That's a big piece of stone. Now, I'm not saying these were the stones that actually built the temple. These are part of the retaining wall. The temple was built up on top of it. But it had some mighty stones in this temple, evidently. Now, Jesus then predicted that the Jews would fall by the sword. He went on to say, there will be great distress in the land and wrath against this people. They will fall by the sword. Prediction number 4. The Jews would be scattered among the nations, Jesus said. Notice his prediction now. They will fall by the sword and will be taken as prisoners to all the nations. Going to be scattered everywhere throughout the world. And the last prediction was the Gentiles, that's the non-Jewish people, would inhabit the old city of Jerusalem. Notice what he said. And Jerusalem will be trampled by the Gentiles, that's non-Jews, until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. That's a reference in the books of Daniel and Revelation to the end times. It can be trodden down by the non-Jews to the end of time, Jesus said. Now, were these predictions fulfilled? They're very specific predictions, 5 of them. Were they fulfilled? Well, let's see what history shows us. Just 35 years later, after Jesus said those words and gone back to heaven, in 66 AD, Gessius Florus, who was in charge of the Roman garrison in Jerusalem, he decided to take a temple tax from the Jews. Please, we want some of your gold out of your temple for us Romans. And the Jews said, nothing doing. And they revolted against the Romans, massacred that garrison, and took control of Jerusalem for the first time for many years. Well, the Romans weren't going to take that sitting down, as we say. So they sent an army down to Jerusalem under a man by the name of Cestius Gallus. Now, Cestius Gallus came here, but for some reason, he mysteriously withdrew. You see, at first, he had the Jews on the ropes. He was taking parts of the city, moving in, squeezing them down, and for some strange reason, he just left the city. Went down the road. The Jewish soldiers chased them down the road. They had a big fight down the road, and the Romans were defeated. But the Christians who were in the city remembered the prediction and the warning of Jesus. He had said, when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, know that its destruction is near, run for your life. Now, how are you going to run for your life when an army surrounds the city? Well, you can't. But when the army withdrew and the soldiers of the Jews took up, this is the time. So the Christians ran for their life at this point in time, and they came over here to Jordan, to Pella. And the Sydney University has been excavating this place in Jordan for the last 15, 20 years or so. And here's some of the ruins left. But this is where the Christians went. They were saved from destruction because they obeyed Jesus. There's a very good lesson for each one of us here tonight. It always pays to obey God. It saved them from destruction. Had they not escaped and did what Jesus said, they'd have lost their lives for sure. Now the Romans then sent another army under a man called Vespasian. Vespasian attacked all the towns, the villages in this revolt of the Jews, and he let them escape, but in one direction only, Jerusalem. So he attacks the city, he lets them escape, but they run to Jerusalem. Soon he's got everybody holed up in one city. Now he can deal with them all. So now Vespasian's going to go to Jerusalem, but before he goes, the Emperor Nero, that terrible, cruel emperor that beheaded the Apostle Paul, he died. And Vespasian raced back to Rome to become the emperor. And he said to his son Titus, "Boy, you're in charge of this thing now because I got to go back to Rome." So Titus now took over. Now Titus besieged Jerusalem in 70 AD. 4 years have gone by in this revolt of the Jews, this war against the Romans, and Titus comes to Jerusalem. He besieges it. Titus starved the Jewish people. How did he do it? We know how he did it now. He built a 5-mile earthen wall around Jerusalem. What had Jesus said 35, 40 years ago? Nearly. They're going to build an embankment around this city and they're going to destroy everybody. That's what happened. What a great tragedy. Josephus, the Jewish historian who first of all fought against the Romans in this fight, then changed sides and joined the Romans, he writes about the terrible slaughter. He tells us that 1 million Jews perished in this siege. In an endeavour to kill the Jewish people, the Romans crawled over piles of corpses to keep the fight going. It was slaughter. Shocking. Blood ran in the streets of Jerusalem, just as Jesus sadly had predicted. And of course, down through the centuries, the Jews have suffered terribly through the ages. They've had these what they call pogroms. Sometimes, for example, in places like Poland, they herded them all into a synagogue and burnt the synagogue and everybody inside it. Of course, the Nazis were the cruelest ones. You come here to Auschwitz in Poland, and here in one camp alone, 1 million Jews died right here. 6 million in the whole war. Most of them went up through the chimney, they said. You come in here through the gate, you go out through the chimney. Despicable sort of people the Nazis were, very cruel. Well, the Romans had built this fortress right here overlooking the temple complex. Why had they done that? Because this was the centre of Jewish pride and nationalism. If there was going to be a fight, start or finish, it'd be here. So the Romans built this big fortress. The Jews had it for a while, but then the Romans moved in, they took the fortress. The last place now was going to be the temple. So now the Jews ran into the temple to fight from there. Now Titus told his soldiers, do not destroy the temple. I don't want this temple destroyed. It's a magnificent structure. But in the fighting that went on, where the Jews were taking their last stand, someone threw a firebrand into the temple and the whole thing went up in smoke. And when the fire went out, the Romans tore that building apart to get the gold and the silver that had melted down between the cracks of the rocks. You can imagine, as the gold and silver melts, it melts down and goes down between the cracks. So they tear this thing apart to get the gold and the silver. Not one stone was left upon another. Now, the archaeologists have been excavating in Jerusalem. You see the sky up there where it hits the ground? That's the level you walk in Jerusalem today. But that's not the level you walked in Jerusalem in Jesus' day. It's down here at the pavement level. Because cities grew over time. How did they grow? Because when an earthquake came, they wouldn't bring in the bulldozer, obviously, to clear everything. They didn't have them. They just bring in rubble, use existing structures and bring in some rubble and build on top. And so after time, the thing grows. So when you go to Jerusalem today, you're walking on that level up there. So they've dug down, and you can see where the stones were thrown down from the temple. These are temple stones here. These buildings here with the doors, what looks like, these were shops where they sold the animals, where they changed the money because there was a bridge that used to go up to the top. The temple was on top. Everything that Jesus had predicted, the archaeologists have discovered. It's uncanny. And you can visit the Temple Mount today and you can see there's as flat as a pancake. The only buildings here are the ones built by the Muslims some 700 years after this, 800 AD. Jesus said it, and it's happened very clearly. If you ever go to Rome, make sure you go to the Forum of Rome, because you'll be able to see the Victory Arch of Titus. He built this in Rome. When you look up underneath that arch, you will see the Romans carrying away the 7-branched candlestick from the temple in Jerusalem. Don't tell me that this book doesn't know what it's talking about. This book is so accurate, it is so dependable, so trustworthy, that I don't know how anybody can say it's a bunch of fairy tales. Clearly they don't know what they're talking about, sadly. And this is what it was, the branched candlestick here. Now, there is no Jewish temple in Jerusalem today, not one at all. In fact, in about 70 years later, the Jewish people who were left, they revolted again against the Romans. You see, the Jews wanted their independence, and they were the worst part of the Roman Empire because they were so gung-ho, as we say, on getting their independence, that they fought the Romans to the death. Well, this was during the time of the emperor of Rome called Hadrian. And Hadrian said, I've had enough. I've had these people up to here. And so now he drove them out of Palestine. You go, leave this place. And so they were scattered around the world from this time onwards. Let me tell you, the Jews are scattered around the world today. There are more Jews living in New York and Moscow and London and Sydney and Melbourne than living in Israel. I took a series like this in New York. 2 million Jews living in New York alone, just one city. They're scattered around the world just as Jesus had predicted. And the Gentiles, the non-Jewish people, are the main inhabitants of the old city of Jerusalem today. You go to the city of Jerusalem and you'll see there's like four quarters. There's a quarter for the Armenians, they're not Jews. There's a quarter for the Arabs, they're not Jews. There's a quarter for the Christians, they're not Jews. And then there's a little section for the Jews. Most of Jerusalem is trodden down by the Gentiles, just as Jesus had predicted. And of course, the Palestinian Arabs control the most sacred piece of real estate or land that the Jews have. That's the Temple Mount. That's controlled by the Palestinian Arabs, because this has the third most holy site for Muslims up on top there as well, one of the mosques there, as well as this Golden Dome building. You can see Jesus' predictions were precisely fulfilled. Very clearly predicted, very specifically fulfilled. But this Jesus hadn't finished. I want you to notice, after he'd given these predictions, the disciples said to him, tell us, when will these things be? When's this going to happen to the temple? But they hadn't finished the question. And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the world? So now Jesus said, okay, we've dealt with that. Let me move on to the signs that indicate when the world is near, when Jesus is coming again. Now, these signs are very powerful predictions. You would think you were reading the newspaper. You're watching the nightly news, the way he predicted them. These predictions reveal that you and I are on the edge of the end. As we said last night, this is no time for business as usual. Jesus is coming soon, we're going to see. Coming for his friends. He gave 4 bunches of signs, basically, 4 or 5. Number 1, signs in the natural world. He said there's going to be earthquakes. Notice his prediction. There will be earthquakes in various places. Now, of course, there's been earthquakes down through the centuries. I've been to Turkey. You can see where the Laodicea city was destroyed and other cities were destroyed by earthquakes. But earthquakes are everywhere today. Let me show you some interesting statistics. The first 10 years of the 20th century, the last century, there were 18 recorded quakes over 6 on the Richter scale. In the last 10 years of the last century, there were 42 recorded quakes over 6, and in the first 10 years of this century, there were 217 quakes over 7 on the Richter scale. The earthquakes are everywhere, all right, and we get that. Jesus said there would be famines toward the end of time. There will be famines, he went on to say. Do you know that 25,000 people at least die daily from hunger? While we're sitting here, every 3 seconds someone is dying of hunger. A child just died. Now another one's died. We've got a lot of food here, haven't we? Sometimes we don't think we've got much, but let me tell you, we are rich here compared to some places. I've been to India where your kitchen, where your bedroom is on the train station. And where people go hungry every day. That includes 10,000 children die of hunger daily. 854 plus million people are undernourished in our world. That means they don't have enough food for health. Not just that their tummy rumbles because they're a bit hungry, but they're inadequate with the amount of food. Jesus talked about things like tsunamis and cyclones in nature and flooding. Notice what he said, there will be distress of nations with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring. Well, you know about tsunamis down here, don't you? And we all saw that Southern Asian tsunami. I don't know how you can get that picture out of your head. There's this humongous wave rolls in all around Southern Asia, and within the space of a few seconds, 200 to 300,000 people cease to be. Just like that. Wow. By the way, we're going to come to the good news before we finish, okay? I just want you to know that. But Jesus gives a real picture, and we need to accept it. But thank God he's going to give us something more than just that. All right. Nations are anxious and terrified about such events. What did he say? How did he put it back then? Let's go back again. There will be distress of nations with perplexity because the sea and the waves are roaring, he's saying. I was running a series like this in Kiribati on one occasion, and they took me to the highest mountain in the Kiribati, 3 meters above sea level. Whoa, that's a climb. You know, if the Kiribati has a tsunami, that's it. They're finished. That's why they've talked about taking the people of Kiribati and bringing them to Australia or someplace. But they don't get around to it. I was in the Cook Islands in Rarotonga, running a series like this too. And my wife decided she'd drive around the island herself in the car, and it took her an hour, and she was done. But all around the island where there were signposts, this is the road to take up to the mountain if the tsunami hits. It's very real in our world today. Jesus talked about pestilences. That means the super germs, the super bugs. We've had a lot of them, haven't we? Ebola, SARS, swine flu, bird flu, foot and mouth disease, and it goes on and on. Jesus said there will be famines, pestilences, that's what it is, in various places. The Spanish flu back in about 1920, 500 million people were infected, and somewhere between 17 million at the lowest estimate and 50 million at the higher estimate died of a flu bug back then. Of course, we've had COVID-19, haven't we? They estimate that 705 million people were infected and some 7 million people died. And what's happened here? I think it's going to come back again. Good. 7 million deaths. Jesus then talked about signs in the political world, in the world of politics. I want you to notice what he said. You will hear of wars and rumours of wars. Do you know in our world we have 30 to 40 wars per year on our planet? That's been going on for decades. Most of us, including me, don't even know where those wars are. But that's what's happening on our planet. 30 to 40 wars every year, and it's been going on for ages. We spend $268 million on war every hour in this world. Yeah, we've been going an hour since the lady started singing, I think it was. We've gone through $268 million around the world just for military stuff. No wonder Jesus said you'll hear of wars and rumours of wars. We spend 80 times more on war than we do on the two things most people don't have: good water and sanitation, because that's the greatest needs for most people groups around the planet. Good water and sanitation. And yet we spend 80 more times on war. We have 13,355 nuclear bombs in stock. I reckon that's enough to do us all in a few times each with all of that lot. Jesus indicated international global conflicts. What did he say in the book of Matthew? Nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. In the middle of the book of Revelation, John said these words: the nations were angry. And let me tell you, the nations are getting very angry right now. And it's not just in one place. There are a number of very troubled spots that could cause our world to go spin out of control at any moment. Were it not for the fact that God says in the Bible, the angels hold back the winds of strife. Many people who don't even care about God, don't even believe God exists, don't realise that their life is held in check because of God. Were it not for God, they'd cease to be. You know, in the 1800s, people said, we are smart as human beings now. We've got the Industrial Revolution. We can make steel, we can make trains, we can make electronics now. There'll be no more war, they were saying, toward the end of the 1800s. We're finished with war, we're entering a new age of peace. The next century, the 1900s, was the worst century for war. We had 180 million people killed from war alone last century. How we love each other on this planet, right? Tragic. And nuclear conflict really concerns politicians. They're not only concerned about the fact that the nuclear club is growing, but they're worried that some terrorists might get what we call a dirty bomb, a little nuclear device. You take it into a city, they don't care because they're going to go up and get, 10 virgins each when they do it? These guys. It's incredible, the concern. Let's move into a third sign area, and that is signs in the moral world, the social world. Jesus said, because lawlessness will increase or abound, the love of many will grow cold. It's going to be very difficult, Jesus said, in the end times to find genuine love in our world. Genuine love. And boy, is that getting true on our planet today. Notice what a friend of Jesus said, called Paul. He wrote to his friend Timothy. You'd think he had plagiarized the newspaper when he wrote these words. Look what he says. But know this, in the last days, perilous, dangerous times will come. For men will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to their parents, unthankful, unholy, unloving, unforgiving, slanderers, without self-control, brutal, despisers of good, traitors, headstrong, proud, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God. You know the biggest churches in my country? They're the sports stadiums. They're packed every weekend. But the churches are empty, most of them. We're lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God in our world today, having a form of godliness but denying its power. Boy, did the Bible get it right. Violence is increasing on our planet today. You know, when I was a kid, we used to sleep outside, take our mattresses out and sleep under the stars, because in Perth, it gets like 40 degrees every day, day after day, and so the house heats up and it's too hot to sleep inside, so you sleep outside. You wouldn't do that today. You would be, excuse the word, you would be a fool. Want to arrive next morning? Our world is changing very rapidly today. Things are not the same as they once were. You know, last year I remember reading at one stage there were more mass shootings in America than days in the year. We were up to day 126 thereabouts, but there were more mass shootings. And mass shootings mean more than about 3 or 4 people killed at once. You believe it? Something's happening in our world big time. If you don't believe it, let me show you the top problems in schools back in the 1940s. I don't think anyone was here in the 1940s, probably. But here were the top problems back in the 1940s at school. Talking in class, chewing gum in schoolrooms, making a noise, running in the halls, cutting in the line. This is serious stuff, isn't it? I mean, not wearing your school uniform and throwing paper all over the place. They were the top problems in the 1940s. Let's roll the clock on 60, 70, 80 years to today. Here are the top problems in the schools today, in many schools. Number one, drug use by school kids, tragically. Number two, alcohol abuse. We have that problem regularly in Australia, especially toward the end of the year. Then there's pregnancy among school kids. That's going to affect the rest of their life, big time. Suicide. Tragically, many kids are suiciding. It's on the increase today because of what's happening in the home. Kid comes home, mum's got a different partner today. A few weeks later, it's a different guy again, and so on. That's the way it goes. And it messes up the kid's life. And many of them are suiciding today. Rape at school. Robbery. Assault of the teachers. I had a friend, he was teaching in Albany in Western Australia. He said, I hate going to school. I just can't stand it because of the way the kids behave today. In Western Australia, in Kalgoorlie, there was a teacher with nice long hair. One of the students set fire to her hair, terrorised the poor lady. She couldn't go back to school again. This is happening in our world. I mean, Western Australia is not a bad state. Imagine New York City. But sadly, this is what's happening. And shootings, as I just said. Shootings at school on a regular basis in the United States. You read it all the time. You see, something's changed in our world. Jesus knew where we're heading when he comes. I'm sorry to put this one up. Don't tell the Australian government that I put this one up. No, this is Australia today. Child abuse. You know, in our country, 1 in 6 boys and 1 in 4 girls are sexually abused before the age of 18 years of age. And I would guarantee that it's not a lot different in your country. Pardon me. Do the statistics, find out. Why do I say it's not? Well, maybe it's not the same yet. But your kids, your people imbibe the same stuff as my people do. Facebook, internet, all that stuff, they're taking on board. And by beholding what we watch, what we read, what we listen to, we become changed. That's why society is changing. Hollywood and the media is changing the values of people today. Lastly, signs in the technological world. Jesus told people to read the book of Daniel. As you near the end of the book of Daniel, there's this amazing prediction. Daniel is told, you, Daniel, shut up the words, seal the book until the time of the end. And at the time of the end, he's saying, many will run to and fro and knowledge will increase. Now, he means a couple of things. We're going to come to one of them a little later on, the most important one. But he has in mind, as we near the time of the end, people are going to be running to and fro and knowledge is going to be increasing. And is that the case today? You bet it is. How fast did we used to go? No faster than a horse could run. That was the maximum speed. But now we go like rockets. You do too, don't you? You jump on the plane here and you take off and you go who knows where. You can be in Sydney for lunch, Perth for breakfast and London for tea. All in one day. Right? We never have run to and fro as much as we do today. But not just the travel that we do, the technology. You have got more information on your iPhone than many libraries have in the past days. Your little iPhone is chockers with stuff. And knowledge increases exponentially in our world. How did Daniel know? Well, Daniel didn't have a clue. God showed him. In the time of the end, many would be running to and fro and knowledge will increase. But he means something much more than that. We'll come to that, I trust, in a later program. All right. The book of Revelation. This is amazing. When you go to the middle of the book of Revelation, look what John says. He says, the people are going to be destroying the planet toward the end of time. Look what he says. The nations were angry. Your wrath has come. The time of the dead that they should be judged. and that you should destroy those who what? Who destroy the planet. Could you destroy the planet 200 years ago? No. Not with a bunch of bows and arrows like my forefathers had at one time, or, gunpowder. But we can destroy the planet many different ways today. Even in your country, you can do it easily, right? What we throw into the rivers and the oceans and so on. Our whole planet is in danger of being destroyed on 1,000 different fronts today in our world. How did John know that in the end times man would have the ability to destroy the planet? Because we do, and we're doing it. Lastly, Jesus said, there'll be signs in the religious world. Jesus talked about religious cults in the end of time. Notice how he put it. For false Christs and false prophets will rise. Now, we've had a lot of different false Christs. You remember the Jim Jones? There was a cult, Jim Jones cult. 900 people committed suicide in Guyana over this religious movement. Tragic. What about Waco, David Koresh? 70 people went up in smoke in Texas there. There's a false Jesus they were following. And then a Jewish Messiah, Menachem Schneerson. Do you know right now on this planet there are a number of people who claim to be Jesus Christ? Let's have a quick look at who they are. Number one, these are some of them. A retired Siberian traffic policeman called Vissarion. I'm Jesus, he says, up there in Siberia. There's a cross-dressing former British spy, David Scheller. I'm Jesus. What a Jesus that would be, wouldn't it? There's a Zambian taxi driver, Jesus of Kitwe. He says, I'm the Christ. Then we can go to Brazil. Inro Christi, he's a former waiter. He's the Christ, he says. A former politician in Japan, Jesus Matayoshi. I'm Jesus. There's Moses Hongwani of South Africa. And we've even got a guy in Australia who claims to be Jesus. How about that? Let me introduce you to them. Alan John Miller and Mary Luck. They claim to be the reincarnations of Jesus of Nazareth and Mary Magdalene. You see, Jesus said these things. We can even see it today in our time, people doing the same thing. But I want to talk about something that's much more serious now, because it affects more people. Secularism is on the rise in your culture too, don't worry. It's on the rise in our world. What do we mean? Jesus put it this way. He said, when the Son of Man comes, will he find what? Faith. Will you be able to find genuine faith in God when Jesus comes? Will it be that evident? You know, today there's a widespread disbelief in God and the Bible today, and it's growing in many countries. Let me give you one example. The idea that God created the world in 6 days was believed for centuries. It was believed in the time Peter wrote some amazing words, but it's not believed today much. In fact, many people don't believe God is even involved in the creation of the world. Look what Peter wrote. Knowing this first, that in the last days they willfully forget, they deliberately forget that by the word of God the heavens were of old. He spoke, in other words, and it happened. Now I want you to think about that prediction. This prediction was made 2,000 years ago. For the last 300, prior to the last 300 years, almost every culture, every religion believed in some sort of a creator or creator gods, whatever their religion was. But that's not the case today. Because in most schools, and certainly in my country, God he's dead. This happened just by chance, time and the process of evolution. How did Peter know that at these end times that would be the case? Because that's what the case is today. The Bible is amazing. Darwinian evolution has caused many people to believe no longer in God. So you see, the global warning signs are in. It'll come back. The natural world, the political world, the world of technology, the social world, the religious world, these signs are in. What do they all mean? What's the meaning of them? Let's notice. When you see all these things, these signs taking place, know that it is near at the doors. What is near? Well, what was the context? What was the question? What will be the sign of your coming and the end of the world? My friend, tonight, you may not believe it. You might not have heard of it, but let me tell you, we are near the end. Because Jesus predicted these things and they're happening right in front of our eyes, and you ain't seen nothing yet, as we say. We haven't even come to some of the most important and amazing prophecies in the Bible. When we go to the ones in Revelation, you just blow your mind. We are near the end. Christ's return and the end of the world and the last empire is about to be set up. That's where we are in the world today. Now, what should be our reaction, your reaction and mine? Should we sort of bite our fingernails and be scared stiff of what's happening, you know? This was not Jesus' intention. Why did he give these signs? Let me show you. He said, now when these things begin to take place, when you see these things happening, he said, lift up your heads. Why? Because your deliverance is approaching. What's that? The last empire is about to appear. What's that empire like we saw last night? No sorrow, no crying. August 24, AD 79, Pompeii arose to a new day of life. I can imagine. I want you to put your imagination cap on what it must have been like. Imagine you get up, you go down the street here in Pompeii. You're going to go off to your business as usual on that day. If you're the more sporty, you're going to go off pleasure as usual that day. Some people, no doubt, they went to the fortune tellers, the psychics, the people who were supposed to be able to tell the future by looking at the dust patterns in the bowls and the basins. But they couldn't even tell what was going to happen in a couple of hours. And then it happened. Mount Vesuvius blew its top and it started to rain that red-hot pumice on everybody in Pompeii. You know, some of the people tried to get out of the gates of the city, but tragically they left it too late. They tried to leave these very gates. They found their bodies, but they had not heeded the warning signs. The tragedy of not listening to the signs that are given, the warning signs to us. You can imagine some people run back here to the baker shop to get their bread. Well, 2,000 years later, they found the bread at the shop all right, but the people who went to get it, they left it too late. They didn't heed the warning signs and they perished in Pompeii. Would you believe, imagine, some of the priests go back to their temple to get some of their sacred objects, their idols and their statues to try to save them. But they left it too late and they perished in Pompeii. They found these images of people, distorted positions as the stuff unfolded around them. Imagine Pansus, here's his nice big flash mansion home. He goes racing back to get some of his art, but he left it too late and he perished in Pompeii. The tragedy of not heeding the warning signs. This is what Pompeii is clearly telling us. We need to listen. So what about you tonight? What about me? Are we listening? Are you listening to the warning signs that God has given so that you can make a course correction in your life? Are you ready for Jesus to come? Because he's coming soon, let me tell you. I guess the most important question tonight would be, how can you be ready? How can you be ready for Jesus to come so that you don't miss out? You don't get left behind and perish. I love the story of Stuart Hamblen. Who's Stuart Hamblen? Well, Stuart Hamblen lived in Los Angeles back in the 1940s. Stuart Hamblen was an actor in Hollywood. He was one of these guys who acted the bad man in the cowboy films. He's the bad guy. But he also had a radio cowboy, country and western radio show. He was a singer, wrote songs, country and western songs. And so he had this country and western program in Los Angeles. Well, one day his wife, who was a Christian, she said, Stuart, I want to go and listen to a young preacher guy called Billy Graham. And Billy Graham was just beginning his work at this time. He was running a program in a big tent, 9-pole tent down there in Los Angeles. And Susie wanted to go listen, so he drove his wife down there to the big tent and he sat and listened. Now, you've got to understand, Stuart was not a good guy. He was often drunk, so drunk that many times his own company had to bail him out of jail so that he could keep his radio program going, because it brought them a lot of money. He was a drinker and doing other things that weren't good. Anyway, he took his wife, and he liked the fiery preacher, Billy Graham. He liked his preaching, he enjoyed it. But one day, as Billy Graham was preaching, the Spirit of God convicted him of his sin stuff, of how he was living his life. God's Spirit got to him. And Stuart got out of his seat. He walked past Billy Graham while he was preaching. He shook his fist at him as he ran out of the tent. He waited for his wife to come out of the tent and they drove home. In the middle of the night, Stuart got up and he woke his wife up and he said, Susie, it's his wife, Susie, God is speaking me to give my life to him. Would you help me? So they got down and kneeled down right there beside the bed together, and Stuart gave his life to Jesus. He got out of his hotel, of his house, and he drove halfway across Los Angeles to go and wake Billy Graham up in his hotel room to tell him, I've given my life to Jesus. I'm sure Billy Graham appreciated that at 3 a.m. I'm sure he was happy. And so this man went on the radio the next day and he told all the people in Los Angeles, you need to get down to that tent and listen to that man preach. He's got Jesus in him. Go and listen to him. You find Jesus down there. That's when Billy Graham's crowd started to increase, and that's when Billy Graham became famous after a while. But some weeks later, he was walking down in Hollywood with his friend John Wayne. You've heard of John Wayne, the actor, right? John Wayne. And John Wayne said to Stuart, because they were friends, he said, Stuart, what's this I hear that you got Jesus in you, mate? What's this business about you got Jesus? And Stuart Hamblin said, well, John, he said, it is no secret what God can do. And John Wayne said to Stuart Hamblin, he said, Stuart, you need to put those words to a song. And Stuart Hamblin wrote the words, it is no secret what God can do. What he's done for others in changing their life, he'll do for you. With arms wide open, he'll pardon you. It is no secret what God can do. Stuart Hamblin found out how to be ready for Jesus to come that day. It's through Christ and Christ only. It's the only way to be ready for what's soon to take place in this world is to put your life in the hand of Jesus. I want you to listen to the words of the song as we close tonight. Listen carefully. Put your life in the hands of Jesus. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you so much. Let's bow together in prayer. Father, we thank you that when we give our life to Jesus, you never forsake us. You're always with us. You help us. Others may forsake us. Others may turn away because we follow Jesus, but you never do. Lord, tonight we have seen the prophecies of Jesus. They're not myths and legends. They're not fairy tales. Jesus predicted the destruction of Jerusalem, and everything he predicted happened. He predicted the signs that we're seeing today. We're near the end of time. Lord, may we be like Stuart Hamlin, who say, Lord Jesus, come into my life. Come and take control. If God is speaking to you tonight, you've not yet given your life to Jesus, and you want to say, Lord, I want to be ready for Jesus to come. Christ, come into my life right now. Just raise your hand where you are. If you've not yet done it, God bless you. God bless. Just raise your hand if God is speaking to you. God bless. Lord, you see our hands. This is no time. You put these things in the Bible to help us to get ready for the greatest event of the ages, the soon return of Jesus. Please keep us safe tonight as we go home. Thank you. Bring us back safely tomorrow. In Jesus' name, amen. Don't miss tomorrow night's presentation. We're going to be looking at Cosmic Conspiracy, Star Wars on Patmos. An amazing prophecy. We go to the heart of the book of Revelation tomorrow night, and you're going to see some amazing things about our great God. And we're going to also understand some things about why things that they are in the world as they are today. God bless you. Invite a friend to come. They will be so glad that you invited them. May God bless you.